When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, we launched the Kansas Small Business Survival Series on YouTube to rally with entrepreneurs in the Sunflower State. Tonight, a new video not only for Kansas mom and pop shops, but small businesses nationwide. There are new variants of the virus in this new year, new treatments, a new president, and many businesses even constructed a new layout to adapt to life with the virus. And small businesses have a new lifeline. The Paycheck Protection Program Round 2 is accepting applications until March 31st, 2021. Tonight, we talk with Will Katz, the director of a regional office of America's SBDC. America's SBDC is a funded partner of the Small Business Administration. The Small Business Administration, or SBA, is the only cabinet-level federal agency fully dedicated to small businesses, and it has guaranteed funding to banks so that they can loan money to struggling small businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. Tonight, we host another Q&A about that Paycheck Protection Program. 10 months ago, Will Katz also joined us on YouTube and gave guidance for small businesses about PPP Part 1.
Piece of advice to all of the employers is to talk to your bank.
PPP Part 2, also known as the Second Draw PPP loan, can be used to help fund payroll costs, including benefits, pay for mortgage interest, rent, utilities, worker protection costs related to COVID-19, and more. Before reapproaching their banks to apply, a lot of business owners have questions about PPP Part 2. So, we gathered in a socially distant way for this roundtable Q&A with entrepreneurs and small business consultant Will Katz, where your questions are being answered live. Hello, thank you for joining our small business Q&A with Will Katz today about PPP Part 2. I'm Matt DeSarl, and before we do full introductions here, I'd like to turn to our featured guest today, Will Katz. Will, could you please let the viewers at home know who you are and a little bit about PPP Part 2?
Sure. My name is Will Katz. I'm the director of the KU Small Business Development Center, and we basically help people start and grow businesses. 2020 has been a challenging time for a lot of businesses, startup businesses and existing businesses. So it has been an interesting year, and we've had to refine what we do just a little bit. PPP has been kind of a lifesaver for a lot of businesses. This was part of the original CARES Act that passed in late March, early April last year, and it provided forgivable loans to businesses to work their way through the pandemic. PPP Part 2 is a pretty important extension of PPP Part 1, and it's a little bit more targeted. It's targeted to businesses who have shown revenue impairment of 25% in one of the calendar quarters compared to the same calendar quarter last year. Terms are very similar to the original PPP, and I think it's good. We're at the point now where we need to start thinking more specifically about which businesses were impacted.
Absolutely. Will, thank you so much for doing this today. Thank you to Arterra for the beautiful venue today for the conversation. Let's just go around the horn and meet the rest of our business owners here. Christine?
Hi, I'm Christine Julian, owner of interior design firm CGI Design Group.
And I'm Wayne McDaniel. I am the owner of Arterra Event Gallery, where we used to have events. Actually, we still do, hopefully, someday again.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Wayne, for the hospitality. So obviously we're recording this the week of February 9th. But Will, if I could put you on the spot and ask if we can kind of publish this live and have you join business owners on YouTube and kind of answer any of their questions in the chat, would you be available to kind of join us for that premiere video?
Yeah, I would love to do that. We did that this spring. I thought that was really interesting. So yeah, let's do it.
So as you're watching this, if you are watching this as the live premiere, feel free to ask questions to Will directly as he's joining us right here in the chat window. So we appreciate all the questions that we fielded before and during the taping of this video. And Will, but before we dive into specific questions, is there anything that you wanted to, any words of wisdom that you wanted to give any small business owners more generally who are watching this?
Sure. I was going to save this till the end, but I'm going to put it right up front. I want small business owners to think about this. I think this was the right thing to do, but we're looking at a year in which our monetary policy has injected more capital into the economy than you can even imagine right now. Something like 24% of all United States dollars were minted in 2020. And if you think about the impact that that has on the long term, I think you want to be mindful of inflation. You can check my track record here. You can go back to our first video, and I think some of the things that I said were not maybe perfectly correct, but a lot of them I think were directionally correct. And so I'm giving you this as a directional thought for 2021 and 2022. As a business owner, there's a good chance that you're going to have to raise your prices. And so I want you to think about that now. Core CPI shows no inflation, and it will almost always show no inflation because the federal government bases benefit payments on that number, and it excludes things like food, energy, housing expenses. If you look at something like the Chapwood Index, it starts getting pretty clear that all of the federal stimulus is working, but it's going to drive prices up. As a business owner, you don't want to get behind that curve. So there's your super special thought for the day right at the top.
Absolutely, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to ask if you could be generous enough with your time again, because of that. I think in marketing we call it the holistic approach to small business ownership that you're so graciously able to provide for us here in Kansas, and for anyone obviously watching this nationwide. And I didn't introduce myself. My name is Matt D, and I have a video production company here in Lawrence, Kansas. So I am a small business owner operator as well. And as part of the introduction, because this is PPP Part 2, I did want to ask what everyone's favorite movie sequel is. So Will, I'll put you on the spot there, and then Christine.
It's hard to top Godfather Part 2, in my opinion.
Perfect choice. Christine?
Well, I have a lot of little kids in my household, so Home Alone 2 is a favorite we rewatch a lot.
Nice, very nice. Wayne?
Well, mine would be the series of sequels for Star Wars.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I'm on the same boat with Will. I think Godfather Part 2 is the best sequel ever, and I also think Empire Strikes Back is the best, Star Wars movie. So we're on the same page. Now that we have that all taken care of, Christine, did you have a question that you wanted to help lead us off with as well?
Yeah, my question is more about timing of when to put in your application for the loan. It seemed like when the date to apply became open, a lot of banks were collecting some, but sitting on them, or they weren't sure how to submit them. And so my big question is there an ideal time? Is it better to do it sooner than later in case funds are taken and gone, or should you kind of hold out and put some thought and time into it?
I don't know that there's any good reason to delay. I mean, I think that your best bet is to be as early as you can possibly be. I mean, I think if I'm a business owner, I want the clarity of that. I want to know what the outcome of my application is. It is challenging, and one of the interesting things about PPP is that it's not a direct SBA loan. It's a loan from the bank that the bank is turning to the SBA to guarantee. And so you can get slightly different results from different banks. And so there are probably some banks that are taking their time, that a large percentage of their client load is coming to them for it, and it may feel like the application's getting delayed there. There are also fintech solutions out there. People can go click a few buttons, upload some documents, and it happens really, really fast. I think for a lot of business owners, rightfully, they would prefer to work through the process with a bank with which they have a relationship. And I think if you can do that, you should. But I guess to answer your question, it's probably a little bit at the mercy of the process of the bank that you're going to use. If I were in your shoes, I would work through that process as soon as reasonably, as feasibly I could do so.
Wayne, did you have any questions, or burning desires to ask Will here?
Yes, I have a question. We have, first of all, already submitted our PPP2 loan application, but I ran into a problem right off the bat with the NAICS codes. So because if you've got a code that begins with 72, you get more money. And so I checked to see what our code was, and then I looked up the definition of that, and I found, well, that's not really what we do. And so then I went, which it was a 5.1 or 5.2 or something code instead of a 7.2. And so I went to look up ours, and we should be a 7.2 something or rather because of the business here. So I talked to my banker because I looked at our tax return and it showed the 5.1 code, and he said, well, that's what the SBA checks your business against. So the SBA is going to check our business against a code that is incorrect. And so we weren't exactly sure what to do about that. We wound up creating a amended tax return, but we can't file it with the IRS yet because they're not taking tax returns yet, or maybe they are now, but they weren't at the time. So,
yeah, that's a great question. As you were walking your way through that, I was thinking, wow, the only way I know to address this would be to amend historical tax returns. I think that's what you have to do. And I think in the same way that PPP Round 2 may be somewhat subject to the timing and availability of the bank, that process may be subject to the availability of the IRS to accept that amended return.
And obviously that's a natural segue for anyone watching this. I mean, obviously check in with your accountant, check in with your bank for, many of the particulars about the actual application itself and your own business's qualifications for that. So I think flexibility, obviously in the pandemic as we're operating our businesses, whether you're serving, formal dining at a space like this, or whether you've changed operations to serve more as a kitchen or catering, or I think flexibility is obviously the name of the game. So I can imagine there are a lot of businesses out there considering the same thing. So it may be possible that I would imagine it would be possible as you're actually changing operations of your business between 2020, 2021, to take a look if there's any flexibility on that code, I would imagine, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a self-defined code. It's just that it doesn't happen that often. It doesn't happen that often that it matters, but I see a lot of tax returns where I kind of question the code. I've certainly seen like legacy businesses that have had significant changes or pivots over the years, maybe started as a plumbing business and kind of morphed into more of a GC. Like that business will still have the plumbing code. People just don't go back and change them or check them very often. It just almost never matters. It matters now.
Exactly, and as you're thinking, what business isn't changing their operations or really the nature of what they're doing right now?
You bet.
So while we're on kind of the theme of flexibility, so with PPP Part 1, Will, the deal for many businesses essentially got sweeter. I know for my own business, it started out as a loan, then it became a forgivable lump sum. So it was, by nature, it was a fluid situation. That's kind of how I look at it in hindsight. So is it possible that fluidity of a loan is variable to the detriment of the business, or less favorable, I should say, to the business?
Boy, I seldom go out on a limb like this, but I'm going to say no. I'm not going to even qualify that no. I mean, I think there's enough recognition of what we've been through as a country, socially and economically and in every way. I just don't see that happening. Now again, check the track record, and back in April I was telling you something different. I was saying, hey, PPP's coming out. Don't go spend that money all the very first day you get it, because you don't know how this is going to change. Don't put employees on payroll if you don't need them just because you think it's going to be forgiven. You need to treat that money with fiduciary responsibility. And I think that was the correct take. And I think it maybe turned out to be more the correct take the sweeter the deal got. When you went from, was the original 75 or 80% of it had to go to payroll, and that got dropped down to 60. Like, that's a pretty big deal. Clearing up the notion of the taxability of the benefit for it when we did the second round was a really big deal. All of this stuff made things a lot more clear. The thing is, we're not done. here's something I think I got wrong in our first discussion. I think what I told people, you need to hunker down and you need to get through the end of the year, manage your cash flow, figure out a way to do it. I think I might have almost underestimated the length of time that we would be still in a response/stabilization phase from COVID-19. And so now I think flexibility is the key, and you better figure out how to get at least through till June and maybe longer.
Well, we appreciate you going out on a limb for us as small business owners and giving that guidance. So
yeah, I just don't see any earthly way. I see nothing in the tea leaves that tells me that there's not a pretty significant recognition of what businesses are going through. I mean, we've had our second stimulus and we're already talking about the third one. So I can't even imagine for the life of me that it would change to the negative.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Christine, do you have any follow-up questions?
Yeah. Is there anything that puts priority for people who didn't get the PPP loan 1 over PPP loan 2 for the first-time applicants? Like, I was fortunate enough to get the first one. Is that held against me at all in my application for the second time?
To my knowledge, no. There's no preference. There's no reason that would push you to the back of the line.
So Will, I have a question on the application process. When we filled out the application, we only had 1 employee. A year ago, we had 4.3 employees. After we get the PPP funds, we'll have 3 employees. So I wasn't sure how many employees to put down.
What did you have on your PPP Part 1 application? You had 4.3?
Yes.
I believe that that's probably going to be the correct answer, but I would encourage you to check with the bank. I mean, you're going to submit a PPP through the bank, and it's really their loan that they are going to have to document was done correctly so that they can turn around to the SBA and make the application that they need to make. So I would really check with them. I mean, I think everybody, this is such a new program. I mean, this is something highly innovative that we rolled out like last year. And it's not impossible to understand why you would have different banks possibly even interpreting rules like that a little bit differently. So I think the best answer is the way that your bank wants to do it. They're taking responsibility for it, and you'll want to follow what they tell you.
Okay, thank you.
And we also have a few questions from social media that I've kind of compiled here. I want to make sure that we get to. One business owner here in Kansas asked me to relay this question. Essentially, the qualifications for PPP Part 2 depend on, profitability in certain individual quarters, right? Whether it's Q2 or Q3 of 2020, right? As compared to 2019.
Yes, I might kind of reframe that from profitability to top-line revenue.
Top-line revenue,
what they're
right.
actually looking at.
Okay,
yeah.
so this small business owner's question was about because PPP Part 1 is, from a tax standpoint, it's being looked at as revenue, right? It's going to be a taxable income. So does that affect that profitability, that top-line revenue at all, or is PPP Part 1 is completely out of the equation?
My understanding is the PPP Part 1 is out of that equation. That's not going to count as revenue for them.
I thought so too. Okay, great. And then kind of 2-part question. So estimates so far, we're recording this in early February. So estimates so far are that only roughly a quarter of PPP Round 2 funds have been accessed so far, obviously indicating maybe fewer businesses are applying versus PPP Part 1. So, I mean, do you have any thoughts on why this might be and any lessons there? And I'll just say, selfishly as a cheerleader for Kansas small businesses, currently Kansas has secured $800 million of $72 billion worth of loans for PPP Part 2. So we'd love to see some more of those dollars come here to the great state of Kansas. Yeah, but what do you think is happening there?
For Kansas, that's actually probably not too far off of if you just allocated by population. I think that's maybe about right, possibly even a little high. So good for us. I think that there are a number of things. We've talked about this a little bit before, but I think we've seen just a perfect example of a K-shaped recovery here. And so you have, certain industries and certain businesses that are on that down leg, and it's just I mean, I looked at, well, I will keep it super confidential, but a business in a service industry where revenues were down 44% in 2020, that's just really hard to deal with. But you've got plenty of companies on the upper leg of the K. Anybody who's doing service on our homes, roofing companies, for example, all kinds of companies. I worked, this is not a local business, but a local sporting goods, outdoor kind of retail establishment. Revenues up 20, 30%. FedEx ground contractors and couriers, revenues up 20 to 30%. So some of it's just that I don't know how much research they did to identify what the percentage of businesses in the sectors hardest hit, what that really looked like. And then some of it I think is probably like what Christine said. I'm not sure, whether I should get into this now, whether I should wait for it to slow down. I don't understand the paperwork that I need to prove that quarter-over-quarter revenue decline. Will they take my QuickBooks statements with my signature on it, or do I need to do something more? Do I have to compile my 941s, put them together for 2020 as well as for 2019? So some of it, I think it will come. But business owners are, by and large, just overwhelmed and busy right now. Even if your revenues are down 44%, I don't think that means you're working any less hard, any less hours. In fact, it probably means you're working more.
Well, speaking of home services and working your tail off, Christine, do you have any follow-up questions there for Will?
Well, I do have a question. I know people who just started a business in the last year, so they don't have a previous year to compare that to. Can they still apply for this loan at all?
My understanding is that anything related to PPP, one of the very first questions that they ask is, were you in business on February 15th, 2020? And if the answer is no, I believe that will make them ineligible for anything CARES Act related. A good question, though.
Yeah.
Will, what is the best question that you have fielded or your office has fielded so far from a Kansas small business owner as it relates to Part 2?
The best ones are the ones that I don't know the answer to, because usually that means that I have to go do some research and prepare myself, because I'll probably get it again. I'll tell you one specific question that I want to highlight actually isn't from a business owner, but it's from one of my colleagues at the Johnson County Community College, SBDC, John Adesi. And John wanted to ask some questions that led us down a path to learn a little bit more about the ERTC, Employee Retention Tax Credit. I don't know if that's something that people are familiar with or not. And I haven't had enough of a chance to dig into this to explain it very well. But when we had the discussion, my thought was, wow, that's something that probably most business owners would be wise to bring up with whoever's preparing their taxes. I think it was part of the pot sweetening in the second stimulus that created PPP Round 2. But if this is something you're not familiar with, at least make sure that your CPA is familiar with it, ERTC.
So again, thank you everyone for your time today. Will, thank you for this conversation and your generosity here. Any final thought to kind of wrap up our conversation?
As I've kind of been saying all along, I think it's really important for us to recognize the value of every business owner that's currently operating right now. And I thank all three of you. You guys are the pillars of our communities, and you provide jobs, and you take risks and chances, and you try to get a return on your capital. And this has been a lesson about what some of those risks can be. And as a society, I hope that we're all committed to seeing as many of you through to the end of this as possible, because the business owners that exist now are tried and true. And if you've passed the test so far, like, you're the business owners that we want moving forward as we go from stabilization into recovery, because you're proven, battle tested. So whatever you can do, I know it's hard, and we don't know exactly how much farther we've got to go, but if we can get everybody through from here to the end, I think it's good for America, it's good for society, it's good for all of us, and hopefully it'll be good for you too.
Thank you so much, Will. Thank you for everyone for watching. And Will, if a Kansas business owner is watching this in your coverage area, how could and should they get in touch with you?
Probably the best way is our Facebook page, which is just the KU Small Business Development Center. And from there, there's some other links. You can find some emails. It's been a challenge just being out of the office. The things that you used to work don't work quite as well. People do manage to find us, though.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and thank you for watching. And this is Matty D reminding you to keep producing.